you ever watch a video of an attempted arrest by a police officer with a young black man, and there's a lot of scuffling going on, and the alleged perpetrator is clearly resisting arrest? Do you ever wonder why that happens? Well, a guy named Mike Muse has tried to answer that question in a column on Medium, and Bill Whittle and Stephen Green and I are going to kick it around right now and see if any of this makes sense to us. Gentlemen, I'll be honest with you. Growing up as I did, in very little contact with the police, and when we did have contact with them, it was like because his kid played Little League with me, and it's just really, I wasn't in contact with law enforcement on a regular basis. And so when I see somebody who's resisting arrest, there's something primal inside of me that says, why are you doing that? This is a law enforcement guy. Just do what he tells you to do and things will go better for you. There's this column in Medium, and Stephen Green, we'll start with you, by a guy named Mike Muse, basically tries to explain the essence of it, and you should read the column. We'll put a link to it in the description
send me a link
below.
to that, please.
Yeah, but the essence of it is basically because of the preconceptions that a young black man, for example, has about interactions with law enforcement based on lore that he's heard through family, friends, and relatives, based on perhaps his own particular experience, that the upshot of it is he knows he's not going to get a fair deal in the hands of the police. And while he doesn't rationally say, hey, I think I'll try to fight this guy, there's something almost primal inside of him that resists, because it's almost a reflex reaction to the knowledge that you're going to get into a filter of a system that does not treat you the same as it would if you were white.
This brings to mind three different numbers that I've seen. And if I don't remember the actual figures, that's all right. They're not necessarily the point. The first is the percentage of young black American males who have been incarcerated at some point in their lives. And the number is just tragically huge. The percentage is just tragically huge. And a big part of that is this war on the black family that the Great Society has been waging. Scott, you did a segment on this last week, I think, has been waging on the black family since the 1960s. And another one of and also the drug war, which has basically turned three generations of would-be entrepreneurs into criminals, because that was the best seeming way to have a better life if you could survive it or stay out of jail, both of which are fairly long odds. The next figure that I thought was unusual is if there is a violent arrest between a black person and a white person, actually almost always male, the odds of the white person being arrested or being killed in a violent confrontation with police is actually a third higher than it is for a black man. And that's not our perception. And you're talking about how much perceptions count. And the third figure is, and by the way, the numbers are both vanishingly small. The actual number of people killed while in police custody, like George Floyd was so tragically last month, it happens very, very infrequently. But the odds are 30% greater for it to happen to a white person than to a black person. But again, our perceptions count, and white people don't have a history of being oppressed in this country the way black people do, particularly in the South, up through the repeal of Jim Crow laws and all the rest. And the third figure, if I could remember what this was now. Oh, the third figure was actually this. Although a white person is more likely to die in police custody, to get killed by the police, a black man is more likely to get beaten. And I think this goes to what you're talking about, Scott, this inclination to resist arrest. Now, it's not cool that results in a beating. It shouldn't result in a beating, but that is the case. And that does feed into the perception. And it's one of those self-fulfilling prophecies, if you will. If you think you're going to get treated badly, you're going to resist, and that is going to result in worse treatment. We really need a calm facts and figures discussion about this on a national level. Unfortunately, there is very little political gain to be had in that sort of a discussion, at least for the Democrats who pretty much own this particular constituency. If black Americans would just you don't even have to start voting straight ticket Republican or anything like that. But if you would stop showing perfect solidarity with Democratic politicians, even ones of your own color, I think very, very, very quickly you would see a huge turnaround in the way you are treated by your own politicians who, quite frankly, have taken advantage of you very badly for 3 generations now.
Bill Whittle, the columnist in this situation suggests that there's kind of a typical narrative when, especially a poor Black person gets arrested. They can't afford the bail typically, so they're going to do time in jail. They can't afford a decent attorney, so they're going to have a public defense attorney who is overworked, has a stack of manila folders on the desk in front of him when he's in court and is just basically reading through them in front of the judge. He's probably going to get into a situation where he's offered a plea deal and may take the 5 years, even though he believes he is totally innocent, may take the 5 years instead of the threatened 25 years. And is more likely, as Steve mentioned statistics, the racial disparities in prosecution and conviction, according to a 2017 study, white defendants are some 75% more likely to avoid conviction or to get a sentence with no jail time than are Black offenders. And so, a Black person may not process all of this at the moment of encounter with a police officer, but there's just this sort of fundamental story in their mind that you're not going to get a fair shake in the legal system. And when the police aren't listening to your words, the only thing you have left is your strength. And maybe that's the best way you can communicate at the time.
I disagree with Steve about the idea to have a calm, rational discussion about this, because a calm, rational discussion leads to pretty clear conclusions. I think we should have a very widely televised and widely copied shouting match about this one. And I think we should just let all the emotions out. There is no such thing as a one-sided coin. Even if the other side is blank, there is blankness on the other side. A coin has 2 sides by definition. There is the other side of the coin. And one of the reasons that this Black Lives Matter whole movement is reaching so much people, but at the same time generating so much resistance, is because it is a one-sided coin, and you can't deal with a problem that has one side. There is in fact a 2-sided coin in terms of this problem, and the 2 sides of the coin are, yes, the police definitely treat Black people differently, and the other side of that coin is that Black people treat police differently than white people do. And if you don't address the reason that cops are more wary of Black suspects, if you don't address that reason, then you are just going to do nothing but basically burn things and flagellate yourself and tear down statues and not get anything done. If you were to eliminate the entire white police force, just get rid of them and replace them with nothing but Antifa people. Even just give them police power. In the course of a year or two, they would start treating Black suspects differently, because that would be where most of their trouble is coming from. Conversely, this whole thing is a cycle. I'm not saying that this guy doesn't have a case. He has an excellent case. I don't have a problem with the police because I'm officer-friendly kind of guy. And when I get pulled over, if I have any kind of interactions, I'm just pretty much, okay, what's the problem? If I was surly and if I looked like I was, hiding something or at the very least, like I was desperate to get out of there, I'd get a lot more attention on a traffic stop than I would have if I just say, hey, sorry about that, officer. I wasn't paying attention. Here's my driver's license. And so you can't solve this problem. And it's a real problem. It exists. But you can't solve it unless you're ready to solve both sides of it. And it's something that would have to take a great deal of time. One of the things that has been so remarkable on the many shows we've done about this stuff in the aftermath of George Floyd, one of the things that just still continues to gobsmack me is that police departments hire people with known histories, officers, known histories of excessive force and brutality. I just couldn't process that could actually be true. So one of the things that you can do right away is you could get rid of the bad cops. But the other thing that you have to do is you have to address a subculture that says that if you succeed in school, That means you're not really black. That means you're acting white because you do well in school. You get that. That's got to be looked at. You got to look at music that basically not only demonizes cops, but but glorifies violence and all of it. You can't just go at, hey, there's police brutality. To the degree that the police are prejudiced against black people, or to the degree that police treat black people differently, most of that, not all of it, because some racists get into the police department, but most of that is a result of their experiences on the job. And so we're trapped in this horrible cycle where black people feel like I should resist arrest or run because I'm not going to get a fair shake. And that attitude is transmitted to the police, who then realize that this person is actually a threat. Now I have to put my face on. I got to put my badge in front of me. I got to be prepared to be shot. And all of this stuff is directly related to each other. And we will not solve this until we deal with both sides of the problem. And I want to reiterate this. This is not the kind of thing that's going to be solved with statistics. Black Lives Matter is talking about police brutality when 4% of black people are shot and killed by police under any circumstances. You walk up to a cop, shoot him in the head, he shoots back and kills you. 4%. If you're not ready to get to the 96%, if you're not ready to deal with the rampant crime and the rampant violence and simply say that we're going to look at the 4% of blacks that are killed in this country and make this into the only issue. It's an issue, but if we're going to ignore 96% of it and concentrate on the 4% of it, it's tough for people to take you seriously. So numbers and statistics won't help us here, Scott. We got to get to the emotions. We got to get to the emotional base. We got to just come out and say it. You got to come out and say it and be passionate about it and get angry about it. And if you listen to somebody who's angry about something that they disagree with you, but you're actually listening to him, then you will be able to make an emotional connection in a way that we simply have not been able to do in terms of an intellectual connection.
You know, when I was in 7th or 8th grade, I had a friend named Kevin, and Kevin was really funny, and we just hung out together. I had always, for whatever reason, I don't think people just make friends with smart Alex like me. And so I never really had a lot of friends. I usually had one friend at any given time. And at that time, Kevin was my friend. Kevin was relatively new to the school. I would always swoop in on the new kids because I thought I had a good chance of making a friend before they found out who I was. Yes. And so, and the fact that nobody else wanted to be my friend. So anyway, Kevin was a young black man. I was a young white man. And frankly, we were boys. Anyway, I'd been to Kevin's house. He'd been to my house. And we were buddies. So we were also in the same homeroom. And we went into Miss Wagner's homeroom before everybody got in there one morning. And we were kind of horsing around, just like pretending we were boxing each other. And I forget who was knocking the other guy backwards. It was probably him knocking me backwards, but one way or the other, one guy slapped the other guy backwards until he bumped into a shelf that was full of textbooks, a giant, like 6-8 foot tall metal shelf that then fell over, and a couple of, 100 textbooks hit the floor. Both of us became immediately frightened of what we had done. And so rather than responsibly pick up the shelf and stack the books back up on it, we just fled. I don't know where we thought we were going to go. We were in that prison farm known as the school. Anyway, eventually we kind of sheepishly made our way back to the class. And after homeroom was over, we were beckoned to the assistant principal's office. And Mr. Free was in the assistant principal's office. He called Kevin into his office first. I sat there with the secretary, and Kevin was in there for a little while. I heard kind of, and then Kevin came out, and I looked at him like, what happened? And he said, I got a 3-day suspension. And then he walked out of the office. At which point Mr. Free came out and looked at me and said, Ott, get on the stick. That was my punishment. Kevin got a 3-day suspension.
Damn.
And I now know that it's probably because Kevin had more of a track record in Mr. Free's office than I did. But it made me immediately wonder why he had more of a track record in Mr. Free's office than I did. Because I knew Kevin, and he's a good kid, and he was funny, and I enjoyed being around him, and he was a friend. And the fact that I got zero punishment except for a stern finger wagging, and Kevin had to be kicked out of school for 3 days, and add that to the record of his violations at the school, disturbs me to this day. When I was in college, toward the end of my college career, I was in a band, and we got done playing a gig at a local bar one night, and it was like 2 a.m, and we were sitting outside just talking, and I looked across the street, and there was a construction site. They were building a new apartment building on Beaver Avenue at Penn State, and I think it was my suggestion that we go over and check out the construction site. And so we went over to the construction site, and of course, trespassing on private property. I decided I was going to climb up the crane that was there. And so I climbed up this crane that was roughly 6 stories tall. And when I got to the point where it kind of goes up straight and then it angles off, and I got up there and I was sitting at the point where it angled off, about 6 stories above the ground, just drinking in the starlight and the magnificence of a 2 a.m. at a college town. And I looked down, and by golly, the entire property was surrounded by police cars. I had no idea State College had that many police officers. And so as it turns out, I later found out that somebody in an adjacent apartment building saw me climbing up the tower and assumed I was about to kill myself, and so called the police. So anyway, the police show up on the scene, and they're walking around with their flashlights down below, looking for who was trespassing on the site. And I thought, oh, I have an idea. I'll hide. And so I laid down on the sloped part of the crane thinking, I'll just lay low. My friends won't betray me, and then it'll be over and I'll climb down. Next thing you know, I feel a flashlight hit me in the back with the force of a punch. And I realized that I was outed. And the police officer told me that I was to come down, and I started climbing down the crane, and the light was right in my face. It was really hard to see where I was going, and I just said down to the people on the ground, I said, "Turn off the flashlight," and immediately the flashlights went off, and I thought, "Ooh, they think I'm crazy." like they're doing whatever I'll say. So anyway, I got down there. They put me in the police car. I sat there for a long time while the guy was writing up paperwork, and I eventually got a citation that probably cost, I don't know, $60 or something like that. I had to go to court. I was going to protest, but I figured out that it would be better just to pay the money and get out of there. That was pretty gentle treatment for a guy who trespassed on private property in the middle of the night, climbed atop a crane, brought out 6 police squad cruisers, and caused all that kind of public disturbance. I'm going to grant you this one, my friends. I'm probably getting better treatment than the average black guy gets in the average American city when he comes in contact with the police. And I don't know how much of Mike Muse's column is accurate and how much it describes the experience of people in his world, so to speak. But I do know that we should read more stuff like this. I do know that we should try to understand other people's experience instead of evaluating it through the lens of our own experience and assuming that is normative for the rest of the population. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible.